All right, welcome back. We are COMP397 in the winter 2021 semester, and it's week 4, part 3 of our broadcast. Last time we talked about cameras at a very high level, talked about split screen mode and orthographic versus perspective projection and a bunch of other stuff. We fixed up a couple things on our build. We also did a WebGL build, again in Unity, just to test out what was happening. And I showed you what it looks like in Unity when we did that. When we switched, we had a field of view problem, which we fixed, went back to 60 degrees field of view. And we were messed up because I went back to physical camera, and I also changed up perspective view, and it kept everything, and that's why it was looking really messed up. Let's make a mini map. So again, what a mini map looks like is what I showed you guys in the PowerPoint in the last slide. There is this little look in field. It looks like this. We see mini maps in many games. You see them in things like Terraria. You see them in things like, or many games. So you can see this. You can pull up a mini map and put it away. You can activate it and deactivate it in some sense. Sometimes a mini map will also give you a direction. There also could be some points, points of interest on your map, and it usually looks from a very high level. It doesn't give you a lot of detail. There's a lot of ways to do this mini map, and one of the ways to do this is to have an extra camera that looks down at the scene. Another way to do it is to make a custom map that can only be seen by the mini map view, which is 2D. Okay, so many ways. So each of these things is a representation. Let's say if it's something that looks like this, of the actual game, right? So it gives you kind of a high level representation of your enemies. We're going to make one that's a little bit more realistic and actually has a separate camera looking down on our world. That's the kind of map we're going to make. But first, we need to make some assets. So I'm going to use Fireworks for this. You can use any program you want. And I'm also going to put these mini map assets up online. Adobe Fireworks is a very old program now. It's been gone for many years, but it doesn't matter. You can use whatever. You can use paint.net or whatever, Photoshop if you want to do overkill. But really all I need is a new document. I'm going to select a document that's something like 300 by 300 pixels. So you can make a document that's 300 and 300 pixels. And notice I'm using a PNG, so it's kind of giving me a transparent view. And what I want here is I want to make a triangle. Okay, why am I going to make a triangle? Because this triangle is going to represent the player from very, very high up. Just like we showed here, right? I showed these little dots in the map. I need some kind of map, some kind of dot that represents the player. Notice that these little triangles here could be, or diamonds. These diamonds could be enemies, and these yellow dots, they could be representative of points of interest, and the little square could be the player. It really depends on how you want this thing to work. I want it so that when I look at my mini map, I have a little triangle that represents the player, and it'll be a green triangle. Again, it's totally up to you how you want this. I'm going to go to my favorite program here, and I'm going to click on the Polygon Tool. And the Polygon Tool, by the way, it exists in Illustrator and Photoshop and a bunch of other programs. You can choose how many sides the polygon has. I'm going to choose that it has 3 sides. So a polygon of 3 sides is a triangle. And what I want to do is I want to select the triangle. Right now it's a white triangle, but that's fine. And I'm just going to fill it up. I'm just going to choose the triangle. Right now, if I do it from this side, you can see that the white triangle goes like this. That's not quite right. Right? Let's try and do that. I already have examples of that. Let's try and do that from the middle. Let's see if I go from about the middle of the screen, which is about 150 by 150. So this is about the middle. Let's say something like that. Not perfect, but and if I start kind of spawning it out the middle, I can modify this in a second. And again, what I want is for the triangle to have the top triangular and the bottom. And I'm going to make this kind of an elongated isosceles triangle where these 2 sides are longer than the back. Right? And I can do that by moving this object down. So here's my triangle, right? And I'm going to move this object. Again, if you don't have the tools for this, don't worry. I'm going to put this up on eCentennial in a second. I'm going to move this up here like this. So you can see that that is the top of the triangle. And I'm going to make the sides the same length. Just by expanding these things so I can make a triangle. It's a sprite. And one thing to note is that this has to be 0. And the height has to be 300. There we go. So that is my triangle. It's not perfect, but it's pretty close. And it's white. I'm going to make this from white to green. So I can just choose my fill color. Instead of white, let's just choose green. Again, choose any green you want, but I'm going to make it so that it's greener, like this. Pure green. Like a neon green, with green all turned up and red and blue completely zero, right? That's what green looks like. And then let's save this thing as my player marker. Okay, so again, some prep. File, save as, and I'm going to go back up. This is where I'm going to put it, just like this. I'm going to go up to my my game. So wherever my game is on my desktop, it's in my Centennial folder inside of COMP397. And I'm going to put that inside of Lesson 4A. And I'm going to save it inside Assets, Textures. And I'm going to call this Player Marker. Player Marker. Okay, so the player marker is going to be like this little green triangle. Okay, it looks pretty big, but you'll see. Okay, so that's player marker. I made a pretty good resolution so that when I look at it from very, very high up, if I look at it 1:1, it's going to be pretty good, solid resolution. One thing I've noted is I made it a PNG 32, so it's got really good, it's kind of a high quality PNG. Save. And if I go back to Unity for a second, so let's say I don't care about this anymore. I want to go back to Unity. So let's go back there. And if I look at my textures folder now, I have a player marker, but I have white in the player marker. All right, I'm going to put this up on GitHub. On eCentennial. One sec. Just bear with me while I do this. So I'm going to leave it like this for now. Okay, let's make the red one. So again, I'm just going to recolor this one. So I'm choosing my color. And my color fill is going to be red this time. Ooh, red. Really exciting. And then we're going to save, file, save as. And we're going to save this as enemy marker. Okay, enemy. And maybe we're going to have other markers in the game too. You know, as an example, that is kind of a diamond shape or something like that, like we saw in the game. And those diamond shape markers are going to be, and I'm not going to put them in today, but those diamond shape markers could be something that makes sense. It might be some point of interest, a chest, could be something else. You can make the thing glow. You can do tons of little effects. For now, we're just going to make it so there's just two, a player marker and an enemy marker. Let's save that. And again, going back to Unity now, you'll see when I did that, I see two textures there, an enemy marker and a player marker. Again, bear with me as I give them back to you in a sec. The last marker I'm going to make, I'm going to get rid of this thing, and I want to make a circular one. Again, you can make this whatever you want. If you want to make your mini-map hexagonal, you can do that. If you wanted to make it so that it is triangular, you can do that. Whatever shape you want your mini-map to be is the shape that you're going to make this mini-mask. So let's go back. So what I want to do is I want to choose an ellipse. And I'm going to make that the ellipse takes up the entire screen space, this place like this. And instead of making it red this time, let's make it so that it is 300 wide by 300 high. And it's going to start at 0, 0. Nice. And let's change the color, in this case, to white. So white. All right, cool. I got a white thing here. And this is the background. Think about this as the background to my mini map. It's going to be my mask. We'll talk about what a mask is in a second. Let's save it. So File, Save As. And let's change this as the MiniMask. MiniMask. Okay. You can also call it MiniMap Mask if you really want to be specific, but it's fine. I'm just calling it MiniMask and pressing Save. Again, if I look up on Unity, you can see that I have a MiniMask. Can't even tell. It looks like a square right now. All right, let's put those three things I just made up on eCentennial for you so you don't have to make them. So if I go back to eCentennial, and I want to add those three little items in, I'm going to put them under my course lecture area. So I'm going to add in a couple files. So let's pull them up. Again, what I'm going to do is under my build, I have my textures and my assets. for now, and I want you to fix them. I'm not going to fix them for you. I want you to do the fixing. So I'm going to grab these 3 files, enemy marker. Here's my enemy marker. And I'm also going to grab my player marker. And I'm also going to grab my MiniMask. And let's just rearrange these things so the lecture becomes first, and then the player marker, and then the enemy marker, and the MiniMask. That's how you're going to see it up on eCentennial, those 3 things. Okay, so some assets for you again. Okay, so you can download those if you want to follow along. And I'm going to go back now to to Up Online and make some changes. So hopefully you've downloaded player marker, MiniMask, and enemy marker. I'm going to go back up to the people that are with me, and I'm going to ask that question. Are you with me? Do you have Unity up? Have you downloaded your enemy marker, your MiniMask, and your player marker? If yes, check mark. If no, X. Let's see where you guys are at. I see 1 check mark, and it's Liam. Oh, hey, there's some more. Eric, and I got some other people, Lushy and Ramandeep. Yay. A few more people. Thank you. For people, the way it doesn't matter. Don't panic. If you don't have it right now, you can have it later on when the video is going to be produced for you to have. This is the video you need for your lab for this week. Okay, I'm just going to clear that. Thank you for the feedback. All right, good. So we need to change this and this and this. These 3 things, we need to change these textures. Right now, the texture type is default. But what I want you to change this to is a sprite 2D and UI. That's the only change I want you to make right now, and click apply. I'm selecting them all at once. I can modify all textures together that are similar this way. I'm going to click apply, and then when I do that, you can see now they have transparency. They look like what they are. So again, what I did was I selected all 3, and I went down to texture type, and I chose 2D and UI. That's what I did. There's different ways of selecting 3. You can left click and press shift to select multiple ones. You can just try and press the first one and then shift and the last one, and it'll apply all those things. Same kind of selection rules that you would do in in your operating system. All right, so now that you have all these selected and they've all been changed to sprite 2D and UI, right? That's what they all have to be. Now we're ready to begin. Now we have some assets. Let's make the mini map. So I need one more thing. I need something called a render texture. It's not a texture like this. It's somewhere where the new camera is going to render to. In other words, right now my regular camera renders to this screen right here. But my new camera isn't going to render to this entire screen. It's going to render to only a small part of the screen. And it's not going to be 1/4 of my screen. That's too big. If I wanted to, I could make it so that this screen takes up my whole screen and this part takes up this part. That is way too big. I'm probably going to make it so it's less than 1/4 of the screen. So it's going to be kind of up in the right-hand corner, right? So I need something else. I need a render texture, And the way to get that is I'm going to right-click inside my textures folder, and I'm going to go create, and it's going to be a render texture, special type of texture I'm making, a render texture. This render texture is going to be made on the fly. It's going to be made programmatically, as opposed to something that I've created in Photoshop or in Fireworks or Illustrator or GIMP or whatever you like to use. And let's just call this the MiniMap texture. MiniMap texture. Okay. So the MiniMap texture, notice it's a 2D texture. Its size is 256 by 256. You can make this bigger if you want to make it higher resolution, if you really want to, as well as these other options. Let's leave everything as you see it. Don't modify anything. Don't change the 2D to something else. Don't make it a cube map or make it 3D. Just make it 2D. Leave it alone. And it's a 2D render texture. That's what it is. MiniMap texture. Okay. We're getting there. Next, I'm going to go back to my edit view for a second. And now we're going to do something new. I want to add in a area where the minimap is going to show. So I know it's going to be done inside of my my user interface up here on the top. However, it's not going to be in 3D space. It's going to be inside of my screen space. My screen space means that it's going to be only on my screen, but not viewable in 3D. It's not like I can see a billboard, something that's a mini map that's actually going to be a physical object in 3D space. You can't see it in 3D space. You can only see it in your screen. So there's going to be two layers, your screen space, and then there's going to be 3D space. Okay, 3D space is what we're seeing in here. So in order for me to do that, I need to right click and I want to go to UI. This is new. And I'm going to go scroll all the way down to where it says raw image. UI, raw image. I'm in my scene. I'm in my scene hierarchy in main. Okay, in main. So again, right click anywhere in main, not in one of these objects, but somewhere over here. Right click down here and go to UI, raw image, and then click that raw image. What it's going to do, you might see something that looks like this, but on the hierarchy, just ignore this for a second. On the hierarchy, you're going to see a new component called a canvas, and you see something called a raw image. Okay, well, what the heck is a canvas, and what the heck is this raw image? This is new. Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's scroll back. Scroll back, scroll back, scroll back. What I'm actually getting if I scroll all the way back, so if I right click and then press S to kind of fly back a little bit, right click and press S, you're going to see that I have this massive canvas that's been drawn, a really massive one. And okay, and you're going to say, why did this get drawn like this? And why is it not here on my screen? Well, what Unity does is it decouples what you see on your screen from your actual game. So this canvas is not something that's viewable in 3D. For example, if I run the game, you're going to see that I have a space now, this little square on the bottom left corner of my screen. And it's overlaid on top of everything else. On top of everything else. It's not inside my screen. I can go forward and back, and this is not going to be occluded or hidden by anything that's in my scene. It's on top of everything else. It gets rendered last. All right, it's like layered on top, right? And that's what this is showing. It's showing me that the screen, this little canvas, and there's different ways of showing this, by the way, but this is the default way. Notice that the canvas object, there is the canvas component. We have a rect transform instead of a transform, something totally different. So we still have a transform, but it's a different type of transform. It's been modified. It's a rect transform, something else. My canvas component has something called screen space overlay. That is the render mode. There's other modes here. We're going to talk about the canvas when we talk about user interfaces another day. There's also camera and world space. If I put it in world space, we'll see it in 3D space, and so will every other character, right? We don't want that. We either want it to be camera or overlay. If I choose camera, that means I'll be able to see it in my editor. I'll show you what I'm talking about. If I click camera, I got to specify the camera that this thing is viewing inside. Example would be in my player cam, my main camera in my player. If I drag and drop it in here, all of a sudden, if I go back to my player camera, you can see that it appears to be in the same viewable area as my camera. That is what I'm seeing, right? It's like literally in camera space, okay? And it doesn't really help us in any way in this view, unless we go into 2D mode for a second. If I skip into 2D mode, then you can see what we see is this thing in camera space. This is what camera space would look like. Okay, again, I don't think it's really useful, at least not in this case. Let's skip back. Let's move it from my canvas. Let's move it from screen space. Okay, let's move it from screen space to overlay. Okay, screen space overlay from screen space camera. Again, screen space camera. We can get rid of the camera. Let's do that and go back to screen space overlay, where now we don't care about that anymore. So you can still do the 2D thing, right? If you looked at the 2D, if you went into 2D mode, by clicking this little button here, and you scrolled out, then you can see this is what the your user interface would look like. Your actual game is like way down here in the corner. Way down here in the corner is where your game is, right? But what you see in the interface is up here. And it's done like that, so it's easy for you to separate your user interface from the game. Okay, let's do that all again so that you're not confused. I'm getting rid of the canvas, delete, and I'm going to add it back in. First, let's go fly back to my game. By the way, if you're way far away from your game and you don't see anything, you can always get back to your character by double-clicking on your player, like so. If I double-click, I'm back in there. And if I move out of 2D into 3D, you can see I'm back into 3D mode. This is what I'm at. So imagine I don't have that anymore, right? All right, let's get back and do it again. So right-click, and I'm going to go UI, and I want to add a raw image. Okay, there it is. That's my raw image. My raw image, if I scroll back, again, if I zoom back out, my raw image doesn't make sense. Remember, I want my raw image to represent my mini-map, right? That's what it's going to represent. By the way, the way I'm doing this is I'm right-clicking the right mouse button, and I'm pressing the WASD keys to do a fly back and forward. If it seems slow to you, press the Shift key, just like you would run in another game. You can press the Shift key to quickly move in and out. If you want to go up and down, you can press the E button to go up and the Q button to go down. All right, so that's how it works. Let's press the E button to go up. And if I press the S button to scroll back out, while I'm pressing the D button, you can get back to this kind of screen right here. Notice that there is a little cursor that looks like in the middle of the screen. This is actually the pivot for this object right here. For my raw image, that is the pivot. That is where it's relatively drawn from the middle of my screen. That's not good. If I want to move my raw image, first of all, let's rename my raw image here to MiniMap. So I'll call it MiniMap. Cool. And what I want to do is I'm going to pull it up by the handles, right? And I'm going to move it to the top right corner of the screen, where I want it. Okay, this is where I want my mini-map to appear. Let's go into 2D mode so that I can only see I'm going to scroll back out. So I only see my screen when I'm designing my user interfaces, and we're going to talk about this when we comes back to user interfaces again another day, right? I want to be in 2D mode, right? It's easier for me. And I want to scroll out, so I don't care about my game right now. All I care about is what my user interface looks like. This is my representation of my screen width and height. This is the screen boundary. And this right here is my mini-map, the little raw image that I have in place. To get a good sense of this, let's go where it says texture and drag and drop in my mini-map texture in there, or you can select it with a little target. Okay, so again, I can drag and drop. And all of a sudden, now I see nothing. That's okay, because that is my mini-map texture, right? Okay, awesome. Very nice, very nice. But I don't have another camera, and that's why I'm seeing nothing. My texture isn't going to be filled up with anything because there's nothing that's rendering to it. Nothing. This isn't a target for anything else. That's nice. Let's add in a camera now. Okay, the camera is going to be a separate object from everything else that's here. Okay, I'm going to add a new camera into the scene somewhere down here. Let's do that. New camera. Let's make sure we remove the audio listener. We don't want the audio listener to be in there, so let's get rid of that component. We only need one audio listener ever, right? And what I want with this camera, which is a special camera, is right now the position is like a crazy position. It's 453 and some other odd numbers. Let's move this back to reset to the position to 0, 0, so you can see it's in the ground right now. And if I double click on the camera, it's going to take us right in there. Let's move out of 2D mode for a second. So it's like right in here. That's where the 2D camera, this camera is. Let's move this camera up above the scene, and let's rotate the camera. We're going to rotate the camera across the x-axis, so that's looking down at my game world. Okay, so only across the x-axis. So let's make it so that it's 90 degrees. Here are the numbers: 0 on the y, right? 0 on the z, right? And this is going to be let's make it so that it is, for now, we're going to move it up a little bit higher. On the x-axis, let's make it 0. And the z-axis will be 0. And the y-axis will be something like 20. There. That is what the camera sees. It's like a camera that's pointing from the top down in 3-dimensional mode, like so. Okay, so another camera. Let's rename this camera. So we'll call this the MiniMap camera. MiniMap camera. Okay, again, we're just renaming stuff. And instead of this thing rendering to the screen, right? I don't want to render to the screen. I want to render to the texture. I want to render to the MiniMap texture. That's where it's going to render. It's going to actually render this thing or draw a real-time texture in 3D. It's going to render it and leave it inside here. If I actually click on the MiniMap texture right now, if I did everything correctly, you'll see what the camera sees. This is what the camera sees right now, like so. Okay, process. Let's do it all again. One more time, right? My MiniMap camera. I put a new camera into the scene at 0, 20, 0, 90 rotation, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1 for the scale. Okay, so it's pointing down. It's like a camera that's pointing down from a bird's eye view on my scene right now. Okay, it's coming top down. It's way out here. The camera does not have an additional audio listener. All right, that's been removed. So another camera that's pointing down. Cool. My MiniMap texture, which was a render texture, is the thing that I'm rendering to. That's my render target. My render target is my draw target. Where am I drawing the stuff that the camera sees? It's not going to draw what the camera sees on the screen anymore. It's going to draw it in this little texture. And what I did was in my canvas, in my MiniMap canvas, so if I go back to the canvas itself, it looks now that there's a little representation of what the camera sees in this little texture on the top right corner of my screen. So if I look now, if I run the game, you're going to see that it's overlaid on top of my screen. Still pretty useless information, but it totally works as expected. So in other words, it shows me a top version of my screen, but it doesn't move. And we have no sense of where my player is, if there's any enemies in the game, nothing. We have no idea. All right? So that's kind of a little mini map that we have here. It's too small. Let's make it bigger. In fact, let's make this mini map 300 by 300. So the way to do that is I'm clicking inside my canvas, going to my mini map, which is a raw image, and changing the width and height values in my rect transform of my mini map. Notice it's a rect transform instead of a regular transform, to 300 by 300. And now you can see that the map is still proportional, but it's outside of the screen. Let's just move these little handles so that the map renders on screen. So now it's more realistic. It's 300 by 300, but it's in 3D view. I'm looking at a top-down bird's eye view of my game. So again, if I run the code, you can see now that it's much bigger on my screen, 300 by 300. It's not quite 1/4 of my screen, but it's definitely there in the top right corner of my screen. And it's completely static. It doesn't move. Why? Because the camera's not moving. Okay. I'm also seeing this gray area here, this gray area. And what I can do is the MiniMap camera, right here. Right now, its clear flags is skybox. I don't need skybox to appear in my MiniMap. So I can change the clear flags in my camera, which is in my MiniMap camera. I can change them to solid color. And when I do, this becomes transparent. And I can choose any solid color I want. This is a default view, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't even show what I'm seeing here because it's a raw texture. So let's change the background just for us to black. Okay, so it's black. You can turn all these off. Doesn't really matter. If I went to 0, 0, 0 on the back texture, it doesn't matter what we see here because it's not important. Black. So when I run it now, you're going to see that it's transparent. You don't see that there's any other stuff around it, but we're seeing still this little mini map in 3D. This may not be what we want at the end because it gives us a sense of depth, right? But what will this look like when it follows the player? Hey, in fact, let's make it follow the player. All right, how do I do the mini map following the player? And this is rough, by the way. It's a rough way of doing it. I could drag and drop the mini map camera so that it is a child of the player object. I have a main camera. Let's rename the main camera in my player to the player camera or player cam, because that's what the player sees, right? But the minimap camera is what the minimap camera sees. Let's drag that into the player object like so. Cool. So now my minimap is relative to where the player's position is in the X, Y, and Z position. The rotation is the same, right? My rotation on the X-axis is still 90 degrees. On the Y-axis is 90, and the Z-axis, sorry, Y is 0 and Z is 0, right? But it's the rotation on the X-axis is 0 degrees as it's looking down from a height. And if I run the game now, when I turn, so too will the mini-map. It'll turn around as if, and if I walk around, it'll show me walking inside of the game. That's what it'll do. Now, this may not be what you want. Why? Because I see, well, a lot of things, right? First of all, I see the shadows, right, on the game world. And, you know, this is okay, but I may not want to. I see depth as well. And that means when my player object is underneath something, you probably won't see it, right? So that's something that's going to be something that I'm going to notice, that my player object has to kind of shine through everything else. If there's something that I'm going underneath, if I went underneath a bridge, or if there was something else. And it gives me a sense of where I'm going, but I don't have a player marker where I can see exactly where my player is, okay? Okay, that is one way of doing it. It's giving me a 3D map. It's a different look and feel, a 3D map of my object. But what about this MiniMask thing? MiniMask, right? Well, I want another image that's inside of my canvas. Okay, let's do this. So another image that's in my canvas. We're going to make it so that it's a UI image this time instead of a raw image. So there's my UI image. Let's also make it something big for now, like 300 by 300 by 300. So a big image. But what we want is the source image to be my MiniMask. Let's drag and drop that in there. So it's a circle. So instead of showing a squarish area or rectangular area, what I want is for this to show the circle. Let's put it in the exact same spot relative to the top corner as my mini map. But right now my mini map is centered on the bottom in the middle of my screen, and I want it to be centered, if I have a bigger screen, on the top right corner. So my top right corner is going to be the pivot or the anchor. So in my mini map, I want you to go to where it says center middle. This right here is the anchor right here. And I can choose where I want my pivot to be on the top right corner by clicking on this little box right here inside of the rect transform of my mini map. I'm choosing this little box right here that looks like a target. Choosing that, and then choosing this right here, this little top right square. When I do that, it moves my pivot for the mini map only to the top right corner. And now I have some different values here in my X and Y position. On my X position, I have something like 186 and 162. Let's make them so that they're solid numbers. So something like minus 190. And maybe something like, maybe that's too much. And maybe something like minus 170. Maybe let's try 170 by 170. So this is minus 170 and minus 170, where my pivot is the top right corner of the screen. And the size is 300 by 300. Okay, let's do the same thing for my this thing here is the MiniMask. It's called image right now. Rename this image as MiniMask. MiniMask, right? And I want to move it, first of all, the pivot to the top right corner, like so. And I want to change the position to -170, -170. And notice that the circle right now appears to be on top of the other map. This is okay. What we're going to do is we're going to change the order of these things. We're going to make the MiniMask be on a different layer or different order. It's going to be before the MiniMap gets rendered. So we're going to see Canvas, MiniMask, and MiniMap, like so. That's in the Canvas element. The child of the Canvas is a MiniMask. The child of the Canvas is also a MiniMap. The MiniMask needs another component. I want to add another component to the MiniMask. I'm going to click Add Component, right? And I'm going to add in if I click Mask, if I look for Mask, I want a mask component. A mask component. It's a special component that I'm adding into the MiniMask object. The MiniMask object now has two components, an image. Well, actually, there's three. It has a canvas renderer, an image, and a mask, right? And the image is pointing to the MiniMask texture, right, which I made as a circle. Let's rename that, by the way. If you don't like MiniMask by itself, let's call it MiniMask texture. So you can see that there's the difference. MiniMap texture, MiniMask texture. MiniMask is the circle. MiniMap is the actual thing that the camera targets as the place where it's going to draw, right? This is the MiniMap texture. MiniMask texture is a circle. All right. So MiniMask is using the MiniMask texture. MiniMap is using the MiniMap texture. Okay. Now, here's the rub. Are you ready for this one? And hopefully you guys are with me. I'm going to take the MiniMap and make it a child of the MiniMask, like so. And now you see that the MiniMap is hidden inside the circle. In other words, I only see a circle. Everything outside that circle is masked. That's what the mask means. It's masked, which means it doesn't get seen. Only the MiniMap that's inside the circle gets seen. And when I run it, you're going to see that it looks like this. I have a round area now, right? The circle is, it's a circular area, as an example. And I can see the white area. The white area is the place where there's no tile, right? But if I run towards the middle, you can see now that I only see the areas of the map that's inside the circle. Anything outside the circle, right? Like way over here, or over here, or over here, it's masked. I don't see it in my game. Oh yeah, I'm going to change it, Liam, in a second. I'm just showing you what it looks like right now. So this is in 3D, right? This is in 3D. Remember, my MiniMap camera right now is rendering in perspective mode. Let's change that to orthographic mode. So again, I've got my canvas. Let's just go through the process. My MiniMask, that's the parent of the MiniMap. So canvas is the parent of the MiniMask. MiniMask is the parent of the MiniMap. The MiniMask has a mask component, right? And then what I want to do is go back to the MiniMap camera and change it from perspective to orthographic. And now you can see what it looks like. It looks like it's in orthographic mode. It means flat. Everything appears at the same level as everything else. And if I run it, then you get something that looks like this. Now I still see outside of the area, and it could be confusing, especially if I'm really close up and I go over here to the edge. You can see that instead of me seeing like the ground, I see white, because that is the color that I made my MiniMask texture. That's okay. I'm just showing you, you could have made this transparent, you know, as an example, and that's okay. But you need to make it something. In reality, our tiles should be so big and so long, and there should be some kind of ground area here that's showing like lava or some place to fall, which means this area here would show what that is. All right, but we're not done. We're not done. Let's go back to that MiniMap camera now. And if you notice, orthographic shows a size of 5. That's the size of my mini map. Let's make it a size of 15. And you can see that it goes way back here. You have to adjust the size for your map, right? Sometimes it might be the right size that you want, right? So in other words, if you go to 15 for an orthographic mode as opposed to 5, then you might see a lot more of your map, which makes sense, right? You want to see your map. You don't want to see what you don't want to see almost the same size of what your eyes are seeing here. Your map should be something that you're seeing as an example. And now one thing that we don't know is, where am I on the map? I can't really tell. I kind of know, right? Like I know I'm probably in this corner right here, but I really don't know, right? Okay. Let's go back. Are you with me? Check mark if you're with me. X if you're way lost and you don't know what the heck I'm doing. And I have to go back and show you again something. But this is basically your mini map. Basic. We're not quite done because we're way far away from being done. We still have lots of things we can do to make this more interesting. And I'm going to do the interesting part in a second for you. Okay? All right. Let's make it more interesting. Let's make it more interesting. What I want to do is I want a player marker somewhere here, right? And we have some player markers. We have a player marker we made that looks like this, and any marker we're going to use later. I want the player marker to appear wherever the player is. So the one way to do this is, and there's many ways, but the one way to do it that I like is to actually render this in a full screen, or sorry, in a quad. Render this in a quad. A quad is just a square that can hold a texture. So what would that look like? I have to get out of 2D mode for a second, and let's get back into let's get out of 2D mode, and let's get into where my player is. So I'm going to double click on my player and rush over there again. So way over to my player. Here's my player. Yay! I want this, wherever my player is facing is where my triangle is going to point. Okay, so I want to click on my player and I want to add a new 3D object called a quad. Okay, so I'm on my player and I'm adding a child object and it's called a quad. A quad is two triangles that are basically slapped together to make a square. Okay, let's add that in. And notice by default the quad is up and down. It looks like it's vertically placed, right? Which means that this quad, I want to flip it so that the quad is placed horizontally, right? Not vertically like this, which means on the x-axis, we're going to rotate by 90 degrees. So now the quad looks like, and you can actually see the shadow of the quad too on the player object. Look, take a look. So here's my player, and your player might be positioned slightly differently than this, but you see the shadow? Well, obviously we don't need a shadow to be printed from the quad. The quad is not even going to show up. We're not even going to see the quad, all right? It's only for the camera to see, the MiniMap camera. Nothing else will see this thing, just the MiniMap camera, which means we're going to play with the camera a little bit to make this happen. First, let's turn cast shadows off. Quad is like a two-sided plane, all right? And it's actually a much simpler object in some ways. Notice that the quad uses a quad mesh, not a plane mesh, and we don't need a mesh collider. Let's get rid of a mesh collider on the quad, so no collider, right? We also want to turn off receive shadows so that the quad doesn't receive or send any shadows. All right, what we do need is a material. And this material is going to be basically going to render our object right on top of this. We need a new material, which is going to be the marker material. Right now, the quad just looks like this, right? It's a little quad. By the way, a plane is much bigger than this. That's another thing. A quad is 1 by 1 by 1, like 1 by 1. Nope. If you look on the bottom of the quad, it's one-sided. But the thing is, what we want is for it to be small. The quad by default, the default size of a quad is 1 by 1 by 1, where a plane is much bigger. If I add a plane in here, let me show you. If I go to 3D object plane. Look what the plane does. It's like really big. And then I have to scale it. I don't want to do that. This quad is like really small, really tiny. Okay. This quad is the player marker. Let's rename it player marker. Okay. Player marker is going to run around with the player. And if I was to just run it like that, then if I look at the player, you can see that there's a little dot that appears on the screen. So if I wanted to, I can just keep the thing there, but I can see my quad, right? Here's my quad. I can see it. I can see my own self, right? And we shouldn't be able to see the quad, right? And it shouldn't clip into the other stuff and whatever. But if you wanted to keep your quad as a square and you didn't care about the marker, you could make it like this. And this is all playable as well. You can see that you can still see where the quad is, and it's pretty good. That's kind of what it does. The quad points up and the camera can see it, you know, as an example, but we shouldn't be able to see it, right? Okay. So if I don't want to see my quad with my camera, which is my player camera should not see the quad, but my MiniMap camera should see the quad, which means my quad has to have, my player marker has to have a different layer than what it has right now. Right now it's on the default layer. Exactly. I'm going to use the calling mask. I'm going to go to my layer and change, I'm going to make a new layer. So I'm going to go to layers on the right here. I'm going to change and add a new layer. And I'm going to call this the marker layer. Marker. And I'm going to assign the marker layer to my player marker. So player marker assigned to marker. The way I got that was I made it a new layer, added a new layer called marker, and then I had to go back to my player marker and then assign it. If I don't assign it, even if you make it, doesn't matter. Okay, so you have to assign it. Okay, cool. Now, trick. In my player camera, remember the calling mask? It can see everything. Check off the player marker. If my player marker is now checked off, my culling mask for my player camera should show mixed. Mixed. So notice it says everything it does, default, transparent, blah, 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 whatever, but not the player marker. Doesn't see it. Not my player cam. So when I run it now, if I look down at my little quad, I can't see it, even though it's there. My player camera can't see my quad. So this is perfectly acceptable. If you wanted your character to be represented by a little square, you could do that, right? And it kind of shows your position relative to where you are and so on. Well, we can do better than this. We can do better, right? So that all I did again is in my player camera, it's using mixed calling mask. So I don't see my marker. My marker layer is a new layer that I created and I attached it to my player marker quad. All right, now I need a new material so I can house my player marker itself. So let's go to materials and I'll make a new material, create, right? And we're just going to call it the player marker material. Material, right? We're going to rename this as player marker. The player marker, right? Instead of it being a standard material, we don't want to make it a standard material. We want to choose UI unlit transparent. UI unlit transparent. Okay? That's what it is. So the shader for the marker, for the player marker, is UI unlit transparent. And then in the texture itself, we can select the texture, which is my player marker texture. Now, or you can also drag and drop from the texture to there, so you can see what the texture looks like. That is the new player marker texture. Just to prepare, let's duplicate this. So again, you can go to Edit, Duplicate, right, for this thing. So I want to duplicate this thing. And instead of my player marker, let's name this enemy marker. Again, you could use the same thing, but we're going to make two. Enemy marker, and we're going to just select the enemy itself. So I'm going to select the enemy marker for the enemy marker material. So material for the enemy marker is going to be still a sprite 2D and UI, right? Sorry, that's the texture. The material, though, the material, there's two materials. There's the player marker material and there's the enemy marker material. And both of them have a different target. Everything else is the same. And they're both UI unlit transparent. Okay, now that I have both new materials, I can assign them to the player marker. So under the player marker where it says materials in the mesh renderer, I'm going to drag and drop the player marker inside of there, and voila, I have my player marker as a quad. Doesn't look anymore like a quad, it looks like a triangle. And by chance, it's oriented in the right direction because we made the pointy end up. And by default, up is where the top part of the texture is. The top part of the material is this way, so it points up. If I run the game now, then you're going to see that I have a pointy little arrow that tells me where I'm moving and where I'm looking. So it gives me much more information about where I am compared to the other thing, which is a little square. Okay, not bad, not bad. But we can do better. We can do better than this. This is pretty small. Some people like this to be bigger, and you can make it bigger. You can make it twice as big. Let's make it twice as big. Okay. And if I go back to the map, you can see that it's twice as big as before. If you like that kind of thing. If twice as big is too big because it's too big for the world, then you can change it again to something like 1.5 times as big. But you should adjust it for your game, whatever your game looks like. Okay, so let's make it so that is 1.5 times as big. By the way, there's other ways to adjust the size as well. And now you can see that we have a marker that's much bigger on the screen than what we had before. So it gives you kind of a really good indication of where my player is at anywhere on the map, depending on where I'm looking. It'll orient myself, kind of across the map where I am. Cool, cool. Like it, I like it. But this is really annoying, isn't it? Every time I look at the player, I'm going to see my little marker. And I don't want to. Not even in the viewport. I never want to see this again unless I want to, right? So the way to take care of this part, this is not your camera and this is not your other camera. This is you seeing this. And you see everything in the scene, right? Turning off gizmos turns off things like you can flip on gizmos off and on. You can turn on the camera or the light that you see and so on. And you can turn gizmos off and on, but it still won't take away this thing. So the way to take away this thing is if you go to the top where it says layers, way here, not here layer, but layers, way at the top. You can see that you can turn off your marker layer. And now you don't see it in the editor. And if you want to see it again, you can just turn it back on. So if you want to do debugging, you want to turn it back on, you can turn it back on. That's way up here in the markers layer. And so we have our little marker. All right, let's test it now on WebGL. So save it, file, save project, right? And file, build and run. We'll test it locally, and then when we know it's working locally, we'll put it up on the web. Let's see what happens. All right, and the other question I have with this is building is, are you with me? Check mark if you're with me, X if you lost me, or if it didn't work for you, or something went wrong, or you couldn't follow along for whatever reason. I see some people are following. Thank you so much for following, guys. It makes my life a little easier. If you can't follow along because I'm going too fast, or if you missed a step, it's okay. It's being recorded, and this is what you need for your lab this week. You need to make your mini-map, and your mini-map is required for your assignment 1 part 2, if you remember. So make sure you have this. This is like, I'm trying to help you with components for your assignment 1 part 2. Hopefully this will help you out. And you can see it's taking a bit of time because I added all kinds of little things, right? So let's wait till this renders. All right. We have one more thing to do on the mini map, and then we're functionally complete for the most part. One thing I want is some enemies, and I want to add some enemies, right? Again, this could look good. So for Liam says kind of looks cool. I agree, it does kind of look good. It's not always for every game. And what about if you're doing you can also make the minimap look from the side. For example, if you have a long level and you want to give your player a look from the entire level, like the side of your entire, so give them a chance to see where, from a 3D perspective, your character is, as an example. You can do that, right? Be careful though, because if there's anything in front of the player, you have to do some tricks in order for that not to happen. Okay, imagine if you're going to go over some kind of, or under some kind of bridge, and the minimap marker, right, minimap marker is on the player. Then the player will seem to disappear. So how do you overcome that problem? How do you overcome that problem? Well, you put the minimap marker way above the character, like way, way high up, right? So it's above everything else, the entire level. And it fixes the problem. Because you're looking at it from an orthographic view, it's going to be okay. Now, I might be like sparking out here, guys, because it's trying to run, everything on, whenever I build for WebGL, it eats up a lot of my cycles, and you can see that it's already done that. But hey, look, it works on WebGL too, right? Nicely too. So it works pretty nicely on WebGL. We're still seeing everything nicely. And if it works here in your local build, it's going to work online too. All right, let's stop this stuff right now. We're not quite done, right? We're going to go back to Unity. There we go. So now we know that it builds. At least for me, I know that it builds. What we need to do now is, now that we've got that working and we've hidden that away, let's put it back for a second. Let's show that mini marker again. What I mean by that is, let's suppose, and if this thing was actually, this pillar was actually, it fell over. Let's add another pillar. So I'm going to add another pillar. I'm just going to duplicate this pillar. So Control D duplicates the pillar. And I can add in another pillar, right? And remember, we can make this pillar defy gravity or do whatever it's going to do. I can rotate it, right? So I can make it so it lies on the side, like so. Okay, here's an example of what I'm talking about. So let's suppose it lies over here, and I'll make a little bridge. I'll make another pillar. I'll fix this in a second. You'll see where I'm going with this. Let's make another pillar, Control D, and we'll make it so that it's on this side. Okay, and in between, we'll have this other pillar. So we'll have this pillar here, and we'll rotate it across the Z-axis as well, or the Y-axis. We'll make it so that it rotates like 90 degrees. Just to show you what I'm talking about. It'll defy gravity because it'll be something that looks like this, a floating pillar. Maybe it's going to be looking like that. I'll make this kind of come together. You see what I'm talking about here in a second, right? So let's suppose that we'll use something called V-snapping or vertex snapping by, remember we did it last time, by looking at the vertex, this little corner, pressing the V button, and then snapping it in. So now it's snapping this part on top of the other one. And we'll do the same thing with this one. We'll do some vertex snapping here. We'll select this object and we'll do vertex snapping. So it snaps right to this, right? So we have almost like this little bridged area, okay, added with some darkness, right? Okay, so it's all kind of snapped together. It might not be perfect, but it doesn't matter, right? But what it's looking like is I have this pillar here, and this is kind of a vertical pillar, and I've got the other pillars. Let's move the pillars inside of their own game object and tiles underneath their own game object just to clean up. So I'll make a new empty game object, create empty. We'll call this pillars. And we'll just zero it out. We'll go to the right here and we'll say reset. And we'll take all the pillars, pillar 1, 2, and 3, and then drag and drop it underneath the other pillars. Just from an organizational perspective, you can hide the pillars inside of a parent object. Why is this good? Well, if I ever move the parent object around, then all 3 of the pillars move at the same time, right? So that's parenting. Let's do the same thing for the tiles. So I'm going to make a new empty game object called tiles. And I'm going to zero it out. So let's zero it out, reset, and then take all the tiles, highlight them all, and then move them in the tiles game object. So now I can do the same thing with the tiles. I can grab the tiles game object. And if I want to move the tiles everywhere, I can move the tiles separately as well. Okay, so tiles, pillars. Nice. Cool. I got the pillar. Now, what this looks like when I run it, if I run this game, if I run it now, is you're going to see a problem. So I got this little thing and I traverse, and then my character marker is gone. Right? Because I'm underneath the bridge. See how it passes through? And that's okay, right? That's okay. If you want that to be the case, you can certainly do that, right? But sometimes I don't want that to happen. I don't want my character being occluded in any way. So what I can do instead to avoid this problem is I can take this marker in the player itself. Here's my player marker, my player marker here, and I can move it from a Y position way higher, like 100. 100. Like way up here. Okay, good and bad. Let's see what it looks like when I'm in my player now. If I play the game now, I see, whoa, what happened to my object, right? Well, I made it 100, and my camera, well, it's not quite 100, is it? My MiniMap camera is below it, like somewhere down here, right? But my MiniMap camera can see like really far away, like super far away. Look at it looks like in the depths of reality. That's what my MiniMap camera looks like. It's like super long, right? It's 1,000. So I could move my MiniMap camera on the Y-axis. I could move that up a lot too. Let's move that to like, I don't know, 200. Now, if I did that, the problem with moving it at 200 is I can see my player, but now my size, I don't see any detail at all, right? Because it's like way up here, man. And you know what? I don't see my stuff. My player is my little dot here. It's the same size because it's an orthographic view, right? Orthographic projection. So my player is way up here, and my camera is, well, something's wrong. What if I change this to 10? Or if I go back to 5? 5, well, I see wrong stuff. I'm showing you, right? Because it shows like the bottom, and well, I'm traversing everything, and yes, but I have no details. I'm showing you problems, guys. I'm showing you the problems that this can have, right? Let's go back to 15 or even 20. If I go bigger, the bigger size I make for my orthographic, the more of the map I see, and the smaller all my objects get in between, right? So that's why I had made it something like 15. And you might say, wait, you said, Tom, that nothing ever seems to get bigger or smaller, everything's the same size. You're right. But it doesn't mean that we don't lose detail, right? So even when I made my player camera appear at 200, I lost a lot of detail. Let's go back to 100. 100 seems to be okay, but then my MiniMap marker and my camera are in the same spot. They're right on top of each other. So I need to move my MiniMap marker slightly below that. And I'm making 100. I've chosen 100. You can make it much closer. You can make it so it's 20. I mean, 20 meters above the player. Way high up, right? As long as there's not an object that's 20 meters, like a tall building or something like that, the player's going underneath, it's going to be okay, right? So again, what you want to try and do is we can change this altogether. Let's make this at something like 30. Here's 30. 30 gives me shadows again, right? 20. If I go to 100, 100 gives me shadows, but I don't see a lot more detail, right? And if I made this at 10, let's say I put this back to 10, I can see more details in my mini-map, but less mini-map, less map. So it really depends on how much you want the player to see outside of their viewable area. So here's 100 and 10 for my size. My player marker now could be at 90 or something like that. I'll below it so I can see it with the mini-map. Or it could be at 99. As long as it's not the same place, it's okay. And when I look at my mini-map camera again, you see I can see my player again. But when I play is the most important part. How does it look when I'm playing? Is it too big, or whatever? And how about when I go underneath my my place, what does it look like? It kind of loses perspective. What I mean by that is, I mean, it looks like I'm inside of their things, and well, it depends on what I'm looking at. This looks like I'm okay, and this looks like I'm okay, but when I go underneath the bridge, something looks off, like I'm kind of passing underneath it. So this is definitely a way of doing it if you wanted to, but it can mess you up. Just pointing it out. Let's put it back the way it was, and I'll talk about other things you can do. All right, so that's one way of doing it. Let's move that MiniMap marker back to where it was. So back to 0, 0, 0. So MiniMap marker is going to go to, instead of the Y of 90, let's move it to 0. Right? So it's right on top of the character where it was before, approximately, right? As an example. And let's move my MiniMap camera. Let's move that back to like 20. And let's move the size back to 15. And that's where it was. So 15 for the camera, 20 for the height, approximately. The player marker is at 0. And if I play it now, I think it still looks more natural. What I'd rather do, and we're going to handle this in another day, because I told you, this is not right. What we want to do is when my camera, when I'm kind of running underneath this thing, I want to have another shader that takes effect that basically selects or highlights or outlines my object, and it doesn't care about the depth. That's what I want. I want the depth to be highlighted. I want to create another shader that I want to apply, a special shader that I make for this object that's unlit, UI, and it also creates an outline, it uses edge detection to create the edge, an outline around my object, and let's say make it orange or something like that, right? So it's always selected. It's always, I can almost X-ray anywhere I am, and it'll show me where my player is. That's different. That's a different effect than this. All right, let's do one more thing for the mini-map, and then we'll be done with the mini-map, and we'll do a little bit of enemies, and we're done. So I want to zoom in here again. So here's my mini-map marker. Let's hide it again. So I don't want to see it anymore. Thank you very much to show me. No. I made this really weird thing just because I wanted to show you what it looks like. When you're going to take a snapshot later on, if you've done a change like this would be a good snapshot to show you that, show me like, you did what kind of I did to some degree. All right, it's not perfect, and it sticks out over here and some other things, but it's okay. I'm just trying to design what this looks like. If you really want to, you can pull it over, the whole thing a little bit over. So if I go to pillars, we could adjust it a little bit so it snaps just this corner right here, right? But for the most part, it seems to be okay. All right, so what's next? Well, I have my mini map itself. So if I go back to my canvas, and if I go back to my MiniMask, then you can see it's like this. I want a border around the MiniMask. I want a border. Let's say, for example, I want a black border around this thing. Black border around this thing here. So it doesn't look just like so raw. It looks pretty raw right now. I want a black border. Or another border color, like the color of the sandy color that I'm having here. Whatever color you want, all right? Black is a little bit harsh. Maybe you want another color. How do you do it? Well, I already have a circle. I just need to make another one that's bigger behind this one. Tricks. So what I do, if I go back to my MiniMask, is I want my border, right? That's what I want. I want another image. So I want to create another, and the simplest way to do that, I'm going to be honest, is copy the MiniMask itself, right? But the problem with this is, when you copy the MiniMask, you're going to get another mini-map. We don't want that, right? So let's just do it so that we make another image under the canvas. So canvas, I'm going to make another image. So again, UI, image. I'm going to point the pivot to the top right corner again. I'm going to make the canvas image the same size for now. Let's make it so the size of the image is 300 by 300. I do not want to make it a mask. It's not going to be a mask this time, okay? I don't need it as a mask. But what I do need is my source image to be the same image as my MiniMask. So its MiniMask is the same image, right? So the same image, not the MiniMask texture, but the MiniMask itself, right? The MiniMask itself, which means that the MiniMask texture is what I want. Let me show you, because I only have MiniMask texture. And what you want to do is you want to replicate this MiniMask texture, call it something else. So let's say I have the MiniMask texture, this thing, and I duplicate it. Control D to duplicate it. Control D makes another one. We'll call this the border texture. Border texture. So there's two. There's the MiniMask texture and the border texture. One is white and the other one is some other color. Well, what you can do is we can tint this color later on to whatever color we want, right? For now, what I want to do is I want to make it so that the new image that I put on my canvas, this new image here, is pointing to this border texture. All right, so image. And I want to go to this color or this source and drag and drop the border texture in there like this. All right, so same size as this thing right now. And they're both white. All right, and I want the image, let's rename it. We'll call this border. And the border is going to be behind the MiniMask. So I'm going to go behind the MiniMask, put it over here. Okay. And I want this border to literally layer behind the MiniMask. So it's going to be, the positions going to be the same. So instead of it being minus 512 and minus 384, it's going to be minus 170, same place where the other one was. Minus 170 and minus 170. So you can't see it right now. Let's make it slightly bigger than 300 by 300. Let's make it 305 by 305. So slightly bigger. So what you can see here is that it is slightly bigger. And if you want it thicker than that, let's make it thicker. Let's make it, 310 by 310. So a little bit of a thicker edge around, right? And let's change the color. And the way to change the color is take this color value right here, which is inside of the border. Let's change it. And you can change it to a color that kind of matches this sandy color if you want, right? So you can pull it inside the brownish area, something that looks like this, and some kind of beige color like this, right? You can try and match it. You can actually get the exact color if you want, but I'm just getting a sandy color. There we go. So all I did was I get a border. It's layered behind this. Now, to guarantee that one thing is layered behind the other thing, make it the parent. So get the MiniMask and put it on top of the border. And now the border is first, MiniMask is second, MiniMap is third, like this. Border, MiniMask, MiniMap. And now you're not going to have a layering issue anymore. How this looks is, it looks like this. So it has a border, and it kind of looks like there's a border, right? Kind of cool. Much better than just not having any border at all. And so you can do a lot of these little tricks, right? That you can put on here because it layers on top of the camera. It looks like that it is, kind of doing the right thing. And you can see where your player is. Yay. Awesome. Make sense? Okay, last thing. I want an enemy. And I want the enemy to find me. So in the text, inside of the, here, we kind of did this, right, to some degree. Now, there's extra stuff you can put in here. You can put an X, so if you click onto it, it goes away. Lots of stuff, lots of controls. We can put that in later on, right? You can put in a little compass that tells you where you're pointing. And the compass, what is it going to be? It's just going to be an actual object inside the scene, which is another little camera. Like, there's a lot of stuff you can do, right? Tons and tons of things. Or you can actually have text in the scene, like physically in the scene that you kind of place. And then what happens is the MiniMap looks at the text, and when you rotate the text rotates, so it says end here, and lots of really cool things. But what we want now is we want to do something with navigation. So I put an area in here called navigation. So if I go down to page about page 30 on the PowerPoint, And there's a tutorial on setting up navigation if you want to watch it later. I kind of plugged it in. It's a Unity tutorial. But basically what I want to do is, what you do is you mark the area on your map that is walkable. That's what you do. And then you create a nav mesh agent, which is just like this object here, right? And then the agent will follow the player, okay? So we need a couple things. We need some kind of object to represent the enemy. We're going to make it a cylinder, right? Or maybe for us, we're going to make it a capsule, right? That's red. Let's do that first. So in the game, right, I'm going to go back to the game itself. So let's just teleport into where the player is, right? And let's put the agent, the enemy, somewhere over here, okay? It's just going to be a capsule right now. So that's all it's going to be, right? So I need a capsule that's going to be here. It's going to be called the enemy. Let's put it in. So I'll say new 3D object. It's going to be a capsule. And let's put it in the, for now, let's put it in the 0, 0 spot. So 0, 0, 0, reset. That means it's going to be over here. And we're going to put it in the right location, which is over here. We don't want it in the ground, right? We want it above the ground somewhere. Okay, there's my capsule. And we want it to have a red skin. So let's give it a material. So again, we're going to create a new material, and we're going to call this the enemy material. Enemy material. And we're going to just color it red. So we're going to make it red. Okay. I'm going to take the material and just drag and drop it onto the enemy. So the enemy is red. On the mini-map, it'll show up as a red enemy. But what we want is the MiniMap marker that we're going to put on it. We're going to layer it. But first of all, this capsule, we're going to call the capsule the enemy. There's the enemy. And the capsule is 1 by 1 by 1. Let's make the Y 2. And we're going to make it so that the everything is 2. If we made everything 2, it would look pretty big, right? So pretty big. It's like barely fitting in the space here. So we want to make it thinner around. So this way and this way on the XZ plane. Let's make it on the XZ plane 1.5 and 1.5. Something like that. All right, so that's the enemy. We can float it above so we can actually see it. So it's kind of tall. 2 meters tall, but only 1.5 around. So it's pretty big. It's going to be pretty scary to watch this thing come at us, right? Okay. Enemy. And I'm just going to put it at a position that makes sense. So again, if you notice, if I move it here, if I put it at like an exact position, like -15, it'll be in the wall. So I'm just positioning it in my game world so you can see where it's seeing. Right now, where it's the orientation of my enemy, just to give you a sense of what it's looking at, it's looking wherever the y-axis is looking, right? Because it's y and x, just like my character, right? So look where my character is looking. So if I go back and look at my character for a second, so let's look at my player, if I look at them, so the player itself, and if I try and take a look at my player, it's looking this way. Now, that's the reason why I'm seeing it so far away is because it also keeps track of the player camera and the mini-map camera. But this is where it's looking. It's looking this way. And whereas my enemy is looking this way too. So what if I want to start my enemy looking the other way? So I just rotate it around the y-axis 180 degrees. Right? If I did that, it's still looking this way. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't flip or anything else. It's still looking this way. So don't worry about it for now. But what about when I add my player marker? So if I take my player marker, I have an object I want to add in, which is another quad. Let's add another quad in. And remember that the quad is which is my player marker, is 1.5 by 1.5 by 1.5. So I want to do the same thing with my quad for my enemy. Let's add a new object. So I'll add a new 3D object. That's a quad. There it is. I want to rotate it across the x-axis 90 degrees. And this time I need to move it above my enemy so I can see only my quad, right? Okay, here's my quad. And I'm going to add in my enemy marker as a material. So I go to materials, which is here, and I want my material to be the enemy marker material that I pass in. Now you can see the orientation of the material. Okay, this is important because we may have to move this around and everything else to make sense of how it's being oriented. Okay. So again, I'm just going to raise it above my object so you can see it. What does it look like in the scene? So if I look at the scene and if I look at my game and if I run over to it, I should be able to see my marker, but I also see my enemy underneath it. Uh-oh. Oh man. I don't want my MiniMap camera to see my actual camera, the body of my enemy. I don't want to see it. I only want to see my marker, which means that my enemy has to have its own layer, and I don't want to see it. So how does this work? I want to make a new layer for the enemy. Here's my enemy. Make a new layer and call it the enemy layer. The enemy layer is only going to be seen by the player camera, but the MiniMap camera can't see it. All right, so again, it's the opposite now, right? So if I go to the MiniMap camera, I don't want to see where it says calling mask everything. I don't want to see the enemy. I only want to see its marker. So now when I run it again, right, then I see just the enemy marker, but not the enemy body itself. See? I only see, oh yeah, I see both because I didn't assign it. Hold on a second. And yeah, let's try that again. Oh, it asks something else. It says, do you want to change the children? No, I don't want just this object. Because if we change the children, then the quad, which is the MiniMap marker, as an example, it's going to change. Let's change this to the enemy marker. Enemy marker. Let's also tag it as the marker layer, which makes it so that I can't see it, not by my camera and not by myself. And then when I run through it again, you can see that as I run through, I see the enemy marker there, but I don't see the enemy itself in my MiniMap. Okay, all right, so that is the enemy. I got my enemy on there, and now I want to do what this says in here, inside of my navigation system. I want my nav mesh agent, I want my nav mesh, and I want some obstacles. Okay. So what I need to do when I set it up, if you scroll down into the thing, there's a way of doing it where I want to assign, I want to select the geometry that should affect the navigation, walkable, and I want to check the navigation static onto that geometry. Okay. So I select the geometry, which is my tiles. And what I want to do, in order for me to see that, I got to turn on the AI navigation window. It's another window that is only available if I see it. So I go to Window, AI, Navigation. And what this does is whatever I've checked, as an example, the areas that I've checked are going to be walkable. All surfaces in this case, because they're all one. Unfortunately, I made my tiles all walkable. Every tile, right, is walkable. And what I want is where it says navigation static, I want to check this on. And it says my navigation area is going to be walkable. Again, the way I got this is I went to Window, I went to AI, I went to Navigation, and then I can see this window. Okay, so once I check walkable, there's a place there called Bake, right? So there's Agents, Areas, Bake, and Object. Right now, by default, I start off with Object, and I just have to click on Navigation Static, and it's walkable. I could also make it not walkable. Okay, I have to check this whole area because the tile is all one. It's all one. Okay. Next, going to go to bake and then click on bake. It's going to take a second, and it's going to choose all the areas that are walkable, right, except for the walls. Notice that the walls did not bake as walkable because they can't go up walls. However, if the navigation agent was on top of these tops somehow, then they can walk on the top. But they can't walk, they can't go through walls. Walls are all blocked. Okay, again, I got that by window, AI, navigation. It shows this window. I was in object. I selected all my tiles, then clicked navigation static. Okay. Now, agents. It talks about the type of agent. It's a humanoid agent, the radius of the agent around, the height of the agent, I made it 2. Step height is 0.75, and maximum slope is 45 degrees, which means you can't go up a wall. All right, if I go up a wall, like that's the height, that's the slope that it can climb, but I can't go up a wall. If I wanted to go up a wall, I would make that 90, which would be crazy. Don't do it. Notice that this part is not walkable. These pillars are not walkable. Instead, we can make these pillars into obstacles, right? So again, if I select these pillars, right, select all the pillars, and if I go to objects, right, I want these things to be obstacles, so they're not walkable, okay? And the way to select those pillars, if I go here, notice that the object, I'd have to choose navigation static, and then I can say not walkable. So you can't walk around these things or whatever, okay? For now, let's leave those out. Okay, cool. So there's my navigation agent, cool. But my navigation agent has no brain right now. And the way to add a brain to an agent, right, and this is like basic AI with no coding on your end, right? Go to enemy, go to inspector, and add a new component, and we'll go to navigation, and it says nav mesh agent. Nav mesh agent. That's what the component I added in. So again, I've got a nav mesh agent, but what it needs, right? What the nav mesh agent needs is some kind of target, right? Needs some kind of target. So it says pathfinding is auto traverse and so on, but it's not going to move yet because, right, if I press play, even though it's got like a path to move and everything else, it isn't moving anywhere, right? It's not moving anywhere because it's just sitting there, right? It hasn't really done anything, and in fact, it's kind of disappeared on me. I don't even see it, right, at all. Where is it? I can see it here, but what did I do? Did I make a mistake? My enemy, my player's camera, my player cam, should be able to see my enemy. It doesn't right now because I didn't turn it on. So let's make sure. And guys, if you're timing out and you have to go, it's okay. I'm going to finish this part. So again, let's try it again. Go back and navigate. We should be able to see the guy. Look at, there he is. He's pretty scary. He's pretty bigger than I am, right? And he's bigger than all the blocks. I can see him when he's coming, right? But I can also see him from over there. All right. So how do I make him chase me, right? Well, I want to move to my target, right? That's what I want to do. So again, different pieces of my navigation piece. First part is I have my navigation, right? I made my walkable area, right? So all these areas are walkable, right? So this is just a way of doing it. And I baked it on. I created my area to bake my the navigation, right? One thing I haven't done is I haven't decided anywhere. So these are my areas that are walkable. You can create other things. There's my agent, but my agent doesn't have any kind of target for me. Okay. So how then do I make it so that it chases me? What do I do? So let's take a look at Unity for some help. So again, remember Unity has everything. So if I say Unity Nav Mesh Agent, right? Unity Nav Mesh Agent. And if I go to Nav Mesh Agent, right, it also has a scripting API. And if there's anything in the scripting API that it'll tell me, right, as an example, is how your Nav Mesh Agent works. One thing it has is acceleration and your agent type ID and whatever. And if you scroll down, it has what you want is some kind of target, a destination, set destination. So here's some script for this, right? So I have my Nav Mesh Agent, which I get a reference to. Okay, and then what I want is I want to set the destination, right, of my Nav Mesh Agent to a point, someplace. Guess what that thing is going to be? The player, right? So I need a little bit of script where I attach it to the enemy to move towards the player, right? Let's make it something called enemy behavior. So I'm going to go back to my scripts, simple script, and then we're done. Make a new script called C# script. We're going to add in, it's going to be called enemy behavior, right? In my enemy behavior script, I'm going to double click. And what I want is a reference to a Nav Mesh Agent. So again, up here, I'll make it public. We'll say Nav Mesh Agent, okay, which is Nav Mesh Agent. And I want to make a reference to it. So in my start, I want to find the component that has Nav Mesh Agent into it, which means whatever script this is attached to, I want it to find the Nav Mesh Agent that is attached to this script, or in the same player or the same component, same game object that the Nav Mesh Agent is part of. So I'm going to say, hey, get component Nav Mesh Agent. Okay, and that is going to be the Nav Mesh Agent. So this variable I just made is going to point to the actual component that is part of my code. And then what I want to do is, just like we did up in Unity, right? Take a look at Unity. So every update, I'm going to change my destination of my Nav Mesh Agent to my player, which means I need the player's transform. So public transform, we're going to call this transform the player, okay, the player object. And what I want every update is the Nav Mesh Agent is going to set the destination to the transform of the player. So we're going to say player.position. So every frame, it's going to change its position to there, and that's all we need to do. Okay, so first, we set up a public Nav Mesh Agent variable that holds data about the component, because the component has all the smarts, right? We also need a reference to the player's transform, which we're going to do in a second. And then we have to make a reference to the Nav Mesh Agent component that's in this, it's in the game object this thing is on. Now we're not quite done. We need to go back to Unity. And I want to take my enemy. Here's my enemy. And I'm going to go back to the inspector. And one thing we're missing, we got a capsule collider and all this kind of stuff. I want to add my enemy behavior as a script on top of my enemy. And I want to pull in my player object on top of where it says player. Again, what I did was I added my enemy behavior on top of my, as a component for my enemy. And my enemy has already a Nav Mesh Agent with a bunch of different stats. For example, the radius, the height, my quality, my priority, my pathfinding abilities, my speed, my angular speed, how fast it can turn. Like, it does a lot of stuff here. And you can adjust these values to make it less deadly or more deadly. Speed right now is 3.5 meters per frame. It's going to come at me pretty quick. All right, let's take a look and see how this looks if I just do this and then just press play. If I did everything right, and if I didn't mess up, we should see that enemy start finding its way towards me. And it's going to come at me, and it's pretty scary. Very scary. And it's going to come at me and bump me, keep bumping me, keep bumping me until I fall off the world. Let's try that again. So let's take a look at that. So play, and I got my enemy. It's coming at me, and I can see my enemy. There he is, and I run away from him, and he's going to try and chase me, right? But there's going to be areas that are unwalkable, right? He's going to try and find my path. Look, he's right there, and he can't really come to me because I'm right here, right? But if I move somewhere else, right, it's going to try and find the nearest path to me, to my player, that's walkable, right? Now, because I'm in direct line of sight, it's going to try to come at me. Well, it's not on my wall but when I'm here, it notices that I'm somewhere that's walkable. But when I'm on the wall, right, it can't get up the wall. So because it can't get up the wall, it can't find me, right? But if I'm down on the ground, right, then as soon as I go on the ground, it's going to find the shortest path to me. Look. And it's going to keep on attacking me and pushing me into like a, it pushed me right into like the hole. That's what it did. Okay, this is great. Let's make the enemy a prefab, and then we're done for the day. So if I go to prefabs, resources, prefabs, and pull that enemy in there, now my enemy is a prefab, and let's make another one. Here's my enemy, prefab. And let's pull the other enemy way over here, right? So I have two enemies now. And this is a small space, so I'm going to get caught pretty quick. Let's see how this looks. If I have two enemies, what happens now? So again, I have my enemies coming at me. The other one's coming. I'm going to climb up on the wall. It stops him for a second. I run away. I'm cheating. But I come over here, and you can see that the enemies are going to take different paths to get to me. And it's pretty darn scary, right? Try and run away from the enemy. He's going to try and come at me. And oh no, it's coming. And then I jump on here, and it's going to follow me. And you can see that their enemies are there. They're trying to find a way to get to me. Look at that. And they found the shortest path, right? And I see them coming, and I'm going to run away, and see if it can find me where I am. And it does, and they push me into oblivion. Again, there's things we can adjust, like, so obstacle avoidance, it has 0.5, quality, priority, and there's acceleration, speed, and stopping distance. My stopping distance is 0. I can make it so it stops right in front of me. Example would be 0.5 or 0.1. So 0 means like it'll try and come right into the exact location, right? So 0.5 might be the right place to stop, so it won't push me off. And if I did that, it's going to just stop right in front of me. So if I did this and, if I left it where it is, then you can see that it's going to come at me. And as soon as it comes within 0.5 of me, it's going to stop right there, and it's going to still push me off, but only because the other one is pushing. There's two enemies, and one of them is trying to push the other one to get me, right? So it's going to stop. It's not going to stop, right? All right, this is cool. So I got enemies in a very simple way. I got my enemy markers, my character. Did a lot today with you guys, and this is where we're going to stop. So screenshots. I wanted definitely a screenshot of my enemies. This is a great screenshot where you can see my enemies that are in place and, my player. I definitely want a screenshot when I'm playing. So take a screenshot somewhere like this. And definitely if you want to show, in the screen, something like where the enemy markers are showing that they're coming closer to me, you can definitely do that. Some kind of screenshot, right? Where you're, even if you cheat a little bit and do one of these, that's pretty good. And you can take a couple screenshots of where this thing is, but you can see it's actually doing your pathfinding for you, and it tells you which direction it's going in. You can try and run away from them. You can make them really slow if you want to, right? Slower than this, where you can try and get away from them and get into like this predicament. But it's going to keep trying to pathfind until it finds where you are. All right, and that's very simple enemy pathfinding in AI without you writing much code at all, actually. But we still have problems, right? The problems are, if I'm on the building tops, they can't get to me. So theoretically, I should have made my level so that I can't get on top of the building. They can't do that. And if I do, so can they, right? Like some kind of ramp. I should create a ramp that can get to me, and so on. All right, so that is where we are. Let's finish this off by pushing this up to GitHub and putting it up live so you guys can see it. All right, so again, save game, file, save program, save project, right? And what I want to do is I want to go build and run. I want to do a build and run. It's going to take a little bit of time to do, right? So I'll take questions now. Any questions around the stuff that I did? I know there's a lot here. We did a mini map. We talked about cameras. We talked a little bit about enemies, and you can use the same enemy right now, this basic enemy idea to make work with your game as a prototype. It's okay. As long as you make a walkable area. Again, you can use planes for this. You can use separate objects so that they're not linked like mine are. You can create ramps. They'll climb ramps, and you can adjust the ramp height inside of your nav mesh agent. Lots and lots of stuff here that you can do, and for these little changes, like I'm talking like one line of code here that I wrote, 2 lines of code for the enemy AI. It's amazing what it can be done. Ben says, my canvas didn't immediately take the default canvas size we set. Is there a way to manually edit it? Yes, you can. Yeah, you can manually edit it for sure. Well, if you stick around afterwards, I'll go through it with you if you have a second. Do we also need to send GitHub pages link for this lab? No, I don't want. The only thing I want for this one is just a GitHub link and screenshots, because GitHub pages, I mean, you see it takes a little bit more time. It won't be for this lab. I'm showing you how to do it, but only because I want you to know how. It's really for your assignment 1, part 2, that all this is for. All right, it's not for you to. I don't want you to suffer for your lab. Even this is a lot, right? We didn't do any Blender at all today. If we did Blender too, we could have. We don't need to do it. So again, you can see how this is working. It's going to take us time redigging. I'm going to put mine up so you see the final results. And again, I'm sparking out right now because I'm getting a bit of it's taking a little bit of cycles from my machine at the same time I'm doing everything. Any other questions for the people that are online? Positive, negative? How do you guys feel about this? Do you guys feel, is it good? Do you feel confident about what I just showed you? Or what? And again, you can put your comments in the chat. Or is it really wacky and out of reach? How do you feel? All right, so there's my start, and here I am. And let's see if those guys are following me. They are. Oh boy, they're gonna follow me faster because we're in this crazy mode. Let's see if I can run away, and I want to run over here and see if they find me. This is the game. Can you find me? Hide and seek. I can see you, but can you see me? Oh yeah, you can. And then they're gonna chase me forever. Oh yeah. Oh, I'm gonna run away, and see if they get at me over here. And there they are. They're gonna path find. You're gonna find the shortest path, and hopefully they can't find me where I am. Haha. You can't find me. Oh, yes, you can. Oh, and I'll just jump over here and run away from them again. There we go. So it totally works on WebGL, which means we're ready to go for the web, to put it up on the web because I've got everything. Let's file, save project, right? Close off Unity, right? And then put everything up on GitHub and in the web. Angela says it makes it easier than setting up A-Star. Absolutely. A-Star has its place though. A-Star has a different place because what if you want to fly and there's no, you don't have any kind of ground whatsoever? What do you do? Right? So that is something you can use A-Star for. And also if you want more complex navigation, if you want it to, if it sees itself, like if you can add things like, we didn't have any line of sight here. So if I add line of sight where the enemy can't see you because he's behind another enemy, or what's the distance between you, and if there's another enemy that's in front of you, then they'll stop earlier. There's lots of little controls you can put in place where there's more control. Okay, so now let's put this up on GitHub. I've closed everything down. I'm going to go first, and it doesn't matter which one you do first. I'll just do the builds first. So I'll say that view changes. You can see these are the changes. I'm going to stage all changes. I'm going to say added enemy, enemies, and MiniMap. So that's the thing I added to my build. Commit 3 files, and then push. So that's going to push to my live site, right, eventually. Okay, and then I can go back to this one, right, when I'm done this one, pushed, go back to this tab, and I'll do the same thing. I'll say, let's view the changes. I got like 36 changes. I'll stage all changes, and then I'll say added MiniMap and enemies. Commit changes, and then I'm going to go push. And then that's going to push them up there too. Now we should be okay. And if I go back to that link, right, as an example, let's say if I go back to GitHub, right, which is up here, and here's GitHub. So if I go back to Centennial, you'll see that I got 4A, and 4A has my 4 commits, and everything looks good. But if I go to my build, which is this one, then you're going to see that there's a couple of deployments, and I should be able to go to my active deployment, which is this one, and it should work exactly how I expect it to, which is start, and I should go here. I see my mini map, looks pretty good. This is live, by the way, guys. I can go around. I can kind of escape from here, and then you can see that it stops. They're stymied, and then they can come after me, and I can run away, and they can try and chase me, and I'm going to be a little bit faster than them, but I can always get myself into trouble like this, and they're going to come at me. You can see on the mini map how they're coming at me, and then they're going to push me off, and I'm going to die. And here I am in oblivion. All right, and that is where we want to go. All right, so we've done our due diligence. We're back to this. We've covered everything that I said we're going to cover. Let's go back to this. We covered, the only thing we didn't cover is Cinemachine. And Cinemachine, what we can do is instead of making it so that the camera is directly on the player all the time, we can make it so that the minimap camera is got a lag. It catches up to you as opposed to it following directly. And it's a great thing. You can make a follow script for the Cinemachine. We'll do that next time. All right, any questions around this one? I think we covered most things. So Lab 4, again, is due Saturday for those people that are watching live. And remember that your assignment 1, part 2 is due Sunday. Okay, guys, that's it for me. For the people here, I'll answer some questions, but I'm going to stop pushing this to YouTube, and we'll see you soon.